Subtitle Society.
Airlines being in the sky, and Alaska Airlines
to make an emergency landing.
Seattle, January 2024. A fuselage panel rips off mid-flight on an Alaska Airlines Boeing. There are 171 passengers on board. The hole is the size of a living room window. The images are playing everywhere on repeat. How can an almost brand new plane fall apart in midair? The reason is completely crazy. 4 bolts were forgotten, but we'll come back to that in detail later. At the same time in Toulouse, Airbus records the best delivery year in its entire history. The contrast couldn't be greater. But how did Boeing, the most powerful aerospace company in history, end up here? How did a company that took humanity to the skies end up forgetting how to fasten 4 bolts and get beaten by a European project that everyone thought was a joke? Hi, Mindset team. I hope you're all doing well. Today, we're going to discover the battle for the skies together. This is the story of a 50-year industrial war filled with strokes of genius, betrayal, and above all, strategic decisions that are more surprising than the last. Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts. What you're about to discover will shake you up. Before we start, let me remind you that you can find this video as a podcast on all platforms. The link is in the description. In the early 1970s, the sky was private property. If you were an airline and needed to buy a plane, the question didn't even come up. You'd call Boeing, maybe McDonnell Douglas, possibly Lockheed, but you'd stick with the Americans. In 1970, Boeing alone held 60% of the global market share. So, on December 18, 1970, something happened in the offices of a handful of European industrialists. A signature. Airbus was officially founded. It's a somewhat shaky alliance between the French and the Germans, soon joined by the Spanish. People who don't really get along, who speak different languages, and above all, who have different interests. And yet, all these people still decide to build airplanes together. Boeing doesn't take them seriously, and they're right. For the first 6 years, Airbus builds A300s that it doesn't deliver. New planes sit unused on the ground due to a lack of buyers. Between the end of 1975 and mid-1977, the outcome is a real headache, especially for Europeans' finances. 0 firm orders and 18 months of struggle. For the rest of the world, Airbus is considered dead, but that's a miscalculation, which we'll talk about a little later. But in the meantime, 1977 arrives, and it's a major turning point.
Built in cooperation by France and Germany, the Airbus is the first high-capacity medium-haul aircraft ever built in the world. It can carry between 285 and 345 passengers over 2,000 kilometers.
Airbus offers Eastern Airlines and American Airlines a deal that you won't find in any of your business textbooks. 4 brand new A300s sent free of charge for a 6-month trial in actual commercial service. But wait, the craziest part is that there's no contract and even less of a guarantee. The deal is simply take them, fly them, and judge for yourself. The results exceed all expectations. Eastern discovers that the A300 uses up to 30% less fuel than its American planes. The CEO places a firm order for 23 aircraft for $778 million. Pan American Airways follows. American Airlines too. Boeing is in shock. The first orders for its competitor don't come from some faraway exotic country. They come from the American market itself, its own market that Boeing thought was untouchable. But make no mistake, Airbus is not a romantic startup. It's a political war machine. If the company survived its early days without any orders, it's mainly because it was propped up by billions from European taxpayers. It's a strategy of total sovereignty, and it's openly acknowledged. For 20 years, the Americans have been crying foul. They denounce illegal subsidies and file complaints with the World Trade Organization, which is actually quite ironic, you might say, because the Americans are known for doing exactly the same thing. But that will be for another video. Getting back to the orders that are starting to pour into Airbus's order book, this is actually just the beginning, because they have a very specific plan. And what they're going to do next will change the industry forever. We're in Seattle in the 1980s at Boeing. The factories are running, orders are piling up. The 737, the 747 icons, a reputation that was built on decades of pure engineering. In the halls of Boeing, no one is really losing sleep over the still fragile European project. Why worry? Sure, they've managed to sell a few planes to some U.S. airlines, but we're the best by far. Then on February 22, 1987, Airbus came out with something that no one was really expecting.
For me, of course, it's a great pleasure to be with you tonight in Toulouse on the occasion of this new aircraft from the Airbus family, just a few days before the emotional moment, if there ever was one, of its first flight.
The A320 makes its first flight, and it's not just a new airplane. It's the first commercial aircraft in the world equipped with fully digital flight controls, what we call fly-by-wire. A computer interprets the pilot's commands before executing them. It steps in to prevent the pilot from exceeding the aircraft's limits. The machine filters out human errors before they can happen. To understand this clearly, imagine that your car could correct a bad turn of the steering wheel before you even finish it. Boeing thinks differently. Their engineer believes that pilots need to feel the plane mechanically. Intervening between a pilot and his machine is presumptuous and even dangerous. Doubt it? They're wrong. And the market will tell them very quickly. Airlines are discovering that the A320 is cheaper to operate, uses less fuel, and lets airlines train pilots faster thanks to a standardized interface across all Airbus aircraft. Orders are piling up and then they just keep coming. Boeing sees everything. The numbers, the market share slipping away. They have to react. And they do. In 1997, Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas for $14 billion. On paper, it was a logical consolidation, absorbing the only remaining American competitor. In reality, it's a merger that never really takes hold. After the merger, the management is dominated by executives from McDonnell Douglas. People whose company had just lost the industrial war arrive at the winner's company and take control. To understand how absurd the situation is, it's as if Apple bought BlackBerry, and it was the executives from the Canadian company who decided the strategy. Harry Stonecipher, former CEO of McDonnell Douglas, therefore takes the helm of Boeing after the merger. He says it matter-of-factly. He wants Boeing to be run like a business rather than a big engineering firm. Fewer engineers making decisions, more financiers. And you understand what that means. Less obsession with the product, more obsession with profit margins. In 2001, the headquarters moved from Seattle to Chicago, closer to Wall Street, further from the factories, further from the planes. Seattle is where the planes are built, where the engineers work, where Boeing's DNA has existed for a century. Chicago is where the banks, the shareholders, and the financial analysts are. This move doesn't change the way Boeing builds its planes, but rather the way Boeing will think. And in an industry where a bad engineering decision can kill thousands of people, this is anything but a minor relocation. Meanwhile, the A320 is quietly making progress. The A320 surpasses the Boeing 737 as the most delivered aircraft in history. 12,260 total deliveries. What the 737 took 58 years to build, the A320 caught up in less than 40 years. Airbus didn't steal the crown. Boeing simply put it down on the table. But what this story still hides is something that Boeing didn't even want to see. It's no longer a strategic mistake or a bad management decision. It's something much more serious. And it's going to unfold in two parts, directly in front of hundreds of millions of passengers. Let's go back a bit. In 2011, Airbus announced the A320neo. It has the same airframe, but new engines and, most importantly, 20% less fuel consumption. American Airlines, a longtime Boeing customer, places an order for 260 aircraft without even considering Seattle. Boeing panics. For the first time in decades, they react. And it's not because of any sense of competition, but because of something much worse, fear. The problem is that developing an entirely new plane takes 10 to 15 years and costs tens of billions of dollars. Of course, the shareholders don't want to hear about that. So Boeing makes another choice, and I'll spoil the ending for you. Sorry, but this choice is catastrophic, literally. They take their old 737, which has an airframe from the 1960s designed back when flight attendants still measured luggage by hand, and they're going to fit it with bigger, more efficient engines. Except these new engines change the aerodynamics of the aircraft. The center of gravity shifts. In certain configurations, the nose tends to pitch up too much. No problem, say the engineers. We'll fix that with software. This software is called MCAS. It's a system that automatically takes control of the plane if the nose pitches up too much. Without the pilot activating it, it triggers based on a single sensor. If this sensor is wrong, MCAS pushes the nose down toward the ground. There's just one big problem. The pilots don't know it exists. They board a plane that's partly controlled by a system they've never been told about. You might ask, was it an oversight? A mistake? Actually, no, it's even crazier. In 2016, Boeing asked the FAA, the American Aviation Authority, to remove any mention of MCAS from the flight manuals. And this authority, which is responsible for all aviation safety in a country with about 45,000 commercial flights per day, or around 16 million per year, agreed that pilots wouldn't know an automatic system could take control of their aircraft at any moment. You might ask why? Well, I'm sure you know the answer. Money. If MCS appears in the manuals, airlines will demand specific training. And of course, that training comes at a cost. And Boeing had promised its customers that the MAX wouldn't require any additional training. That's where things stood on October 29, 2018. In Jakarta, it's 6:20 in the morning. Lion Air 610 takes off normally. A few minutes later, the nose dips down. The pilots pull on the yoke. It dips again. They pull again. For 11 minutes, the MCS forces the nose down more than 20 times in a row. The first officer frantically searches through the manual. He doesn't know what he's fighting against because no one told him it existed. At 6:31, he says, "The plane is descending." The captain replies, "It's okay." 19 seconds later, the plane crashes into the Java Sea. 189 dead. Boeing knows what happened. Investigations will prove it later. They knew about the MCS flaws before this crash, but they chose not to change anything. 5 months later, Ethiopian Airlines 302 crashes 6 minutes after takeoff. 157 more dead, 346 dead. The MAX is grounded for 21 months. Criminal investigations are launched. And then comes January 2024 in Portland.
We are in an emergency situation. We are depressurized. We need to return. We have 177 passengers.
Alaska Airlines 1282 takes off normally. 6 minutes later, at 4,500 meters, a fuselage panel tears off. The cabin depressurizes. Objects are sucked out through the hole. A child is almost swept away. No one dies because, miraculously, the seat next to the hole was empty. The investigation will reveal that 4 bolts had simply never been put back in place during a factory repair. 4 bolts. We're not talking about a technological failure or a design flaw. 4 bolts that no one put back. In a factory where obviously no one checked. That's the result of 20 years of financial decision-making applied to an engineering industry.
This incident further calls into question the reliability of the Boeing 737 MAX, the model of the plane. It already suffers from a bad reputation after 2 crashes that occurred in 2018 and 2019, which led to the grounding of all 737 MAX planes worldwide.
The CEO was replaced. It didn't happen in a day, but rather as a slow decline in discipline. A subtle erosion, decision after decision, quarter after quarter, until the day when a panel tears off at 4,500 meters. But the story doesn't end there. While Boeing is burning, Airbus is producing. With discipline year after year, while the competitor was committing harakiri. In 2025, Airbus delivers 793 planes to 91 airlines around the world. Its order book reaches a historic record, 8,754 aircraft, 7 consecutive years of outselling Boeing. An installed fleet that's 16% larger, an order book that's 35% bigger. But here's the problem that no one is facing. The entire world depends on 2 manufacturers for the entirety of global air travel. And one of them is under criminal investigation, under increased FAA scrutiny, with a ruined reputation in factories where bolts go missing without anyone apparently noticing. This isn't just a Boeing problem, it's a civilizational problem. If Boeing stays on this course, and nothing now ensures change, Airbus will end up the only company building the world's planes, setting all prices and delivery schedules. A de facto monopoly on transporting 4 billion passengers a year. So obviously, and this was clear during the trial, there's little chance that the American government will abandon Boeing for obvious reasons of sovereignty. But in the shadows, someone else is watching. China is moving its pieces forward as it always has. COMAC and its C919 have reached 182 aircraft in service as of August 2025. An analysis by a specialized firm, IBA, concludes that this is a clear beginning of the breakup of the Airbus-Boeing duopoly. The aircraft is currently restricted to the Chinese domestic market, lacking European or American certification and global support infrastructure. The C919 does not compete at all on a global scale. Not yet. Because for now, Beijing still needs Airbus and Boeing, and Beijing knows it. So they buy, they order, they keep both suppliers going, while quietly funding the third one, their own. It's the coldest strategy there is. Spending billions to depend on no one. Proof of this. On March 25, 2026, China Eastern Airlines just ordered 101 Airbus A320neo for $15.8 billion. And Boeing, in all this, a colossal contract for 500 planes was being negotiated, scheduled to be signed at the China-United States Summit in Beijing. but the visit has just been postponed because of the war in Iran. 500 planes on hold. While Boeing is fighting for its survival and Airbus is managing its waiting lists, Beijing is quietly building its third option, exactly like Airbus did in 1975 when everyone thought it was a lost cause. A bit like BYD, the Chinese car brand, mocked by Elon Musk himself before becoming the leader in electric cars, taking over the whole world and even surpassing Tesla, as you can see in the video on screen.